We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back with longtime host of this here radio show and Liberty Nation's senior political analyst, Mr. Tim Donner. Earlier in the show, we were talking about the zeitgeist, the situation with Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But now I'd really like to dive into the other candidates, because it really is a conundrum about what kind of impact, what kind of factors they'll play on the voting margins and also the appearance margins, because, you know, things are won and lost on how they look. Tim, thanks for coming back. Let's hear your take on the plethora of candidates that are available to the American public this election season.
Well, let's start with the most mysterious one, who is not an announced candidate yet, but everybody expects to announce next year, and that would be
Clint Eastwood. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, Clint Eastwood will just give the nominating speech at the convention.
The new Charlton Heston.
2012, yes. But Joe Manchin is the big X factor, and I would say in an ordinary year as a third-party candidate, he would look very strong to possibly win a state or two, but certainly to affect the balance of the race. However, and the reason, by the way, is because he is seen as a true down-the-middle politician who rejects the extremes that too many voters see that the Democrats and Republicans have resorted to in their own rhetoric. Now, in an ordinary year, he would have a pretty clear field, like a Ross Perot in 1992 as a third-party candidate.
18%,
But the problem is you've got right next to him Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has, in some polls, done so well that he, in fact, in a three-way race, hypothetical between RFK Jr., Trump, and Biden, RFK Jr. actually wins the votes of people under 45. So that's how, that's how effective his candidacy has been so far. And of course, he's got enormous name recognition. And then you've got another probably 3 to 5% that will be pulled by Jill Stein, who is the bane of Hillary Clinton's life. Hillary convinced that Jill Stein's votes in 2016 that would have gone to her lost her the election, and she may be right. And then you've got Cornel West, who will siphon off votes from the far left, the socialists, the cultural Marxists, the Ivy League academic types. So it's a very divided field, and I would argue that every one of those candidates, save one, will damage Joe Biden. But the one who I think it's up in the air who he will damage more is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because he has a very disparate sort of following, people all over the spectrum. You've got everyone from anti-vaxxers to peace activists to pro-Palestinian to pro-Israeli supporters. So I'd say Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the biggest X factor in a race, which is one huge X factor in some.
I would absolutely agree with your assessment, but I think that could very much change once the primary season's over. So once whoever is the Republican candidate, almost certainly Donald Trump, unless something of historical significance happens, and Joe Biden on the other side, unless something of a medical issue or historical significance.
I will say, Mark, there is one other candidacy that we tend to overlook.
Sure.
And that is in 1980. John Anderson, who was a liberal Republican, which is now a dinosaur. There aren't any, just like conservative Democrats. But John Anderson ran as a third-party candidate against Jimmy Carter, who was pictured as incompetent, and it proven so in the White House, and Ronald Reagan, who was depicted as a dangerous extremist who would start nuclear war. And John Anderson won 9% of the vote. Now, that did not affect that election because Reagan won a landslide, and he would have won huge with or without John Anderson. But in a race like this with two candidates who are so explosively controversial and a bunch of wild cards at a time where 40% of America represents themselves as independents, dwarfing both self-proclaimed Republicans and Democrats. Who knows?
Yeah, I although once they have declared the candidates for Republicans and Democrats, then I wonder how much of each other's fire will be aimed rather than at Biden and Trump, but at Robert F. Kennedy, because he certainly, as you point out, he certainly picks up the votes of those who have put a lot of thought into vaccines, because he has really devoted much of his later career to that kind of thing, and also environmental issues. He'll also pick up that. Yeah. But by the same token, he's very much an open borders Democrat and pro-abortion, which I find.
Well, he's pro-abortion. I don't think he's open borders anymore. He actually said he was open borders and supported Biden's policy, but then he went to the border and changed his mind. He
went to the border and met with his tactical team who'd seen the polling and changed his mind. Is perhaps. I mean, I wouldn't. He seems to me a very honourable guy, so I'm sure
he seems
he says that he's changed his mind.
He seems to me to be a very honest and serious candidate.
Speaking of serious candidates, we also haven't talked about Mr. Dean Phillips, have we?
Yes. And I think that he has, there's a tendency to just dismiss him as sort of a gadfly who's involved in some sort of vanity candidacy, but that's not really the case. Dean Phillips is a fairly new congressman from Minnesota who supported the Biden agenda, voted for almost everything that Biden brought forward, but kept saying over and over, Joe Biden cannot win a second term. He's too old, and somebody needs to challenge him. When nobody did, Dean Phillips said, okay, I'm going to challenge him, if only to make the point that we need somebody younger as the Democratic nominee. And so what he's done, though, by challenging Biden, is he's even magnified the biggest issue that Biden already has, which is his age, coming from within his own party, and at the same time weakened Joe Biden's general election campaign, because anytime a sitting president gets challenged in a primary, it weakens them for the general election. So Dean Phillips, too, is another guy who's serious.
Yeah.
He's not on an ego trip. He knows he's not going to win the nomination, but he's going to make the point. And it's even possible, Mark, that his candidacy, the fact that somebody decided to challenge Joe Biden, could open the floodgates for one or more others to do so. But they're running out of time.
The schedule's moving. And just a final word, Gavin Newsom, he's teasing everybody, isn't he? He's teasing everybody. Your final thoughts on Mr. Newsom?
Well, it's a good segue from Dean Phillips, because Dean Phillips has basically said, come on, Governor Newsom, you're running a shadow campaign. Why don't you just admit you're running for president? John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, said the same thing. We have three candidates in our party. One is Joe Biden, another is Dean Phillips, and the third is Gavin Newsom, but only two of them have declared their candidacy.
Well, I think
he said real.
Yeah, I think he tangentially called him a coward as well for not declaring.
He did. Okay. So Dean Phillips has become the Democrat truth teller along with John Fetterman.
These are strange days indeed. Tim Donner, thanks ever so much.
Great fun, Mark. Thank you.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are LibertyNation.com.